Our top story of the day is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States of America and, of course, his meeting first with US Vice-President Kamala Harris. They discussed the COVID-19 situation in their respective countries, including ongoing efforts to contain the pandemic through vaccination efforts. Both leaders also exchanged, importantly, views on recent global developments, specifically in Afghanistan. Take a look at the special report with Modi's visit. Namaste, America.
Hard-nosed diplomacy,
the climate crisis,
fond remembrance of a shared background, and a tour of the Eisenhower Tower. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first meeting with US Vice-President Kamala Harris, who traces her roots to India, was hectic and filled with optics. The two leaders addressed the media jointly.
About the pride.
Kamala Harris began by lauding India's decision to restart Vaccine Maitri, the mission to export vaccines to low-income countries.
On COVID-19, our nations have worked together. Early in the pandemic, India was a vital source of vaccines for other countries.
India's phenomenal vaccination drive too caught the United States Vice President's eye.
It is of particular note and admiration that India, I'm told, is currently vaccinating approximately 10 million people a day as of today.
In the backdrop of Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, Kamala Harris stressed on the need to work together to strengthen democracy.
As democracies around the world are under threat, it is imperative that we defend democratic principles and institutions within our respective countries and around the world.
Kamala Harris also remembered her Indian connection.
I know from personal experience and from my family of the commitment of the Indian people to democracy and to freedom and to the work that may be done and can be done to imagine and then actually achieve our vision for democratic principles and institutions.
Prime Minister Modi thanked the United States for extending help during the second COVID wave.
जब भारत कोविड की दूसरी लहर से बहुत ही पीड़ित था, बड़ा संकट था, लेकिन उस समय जिस प्रकार से आत्मीयता से आपने भारत की चिंता की, जो शब्द व्यक्त किए और जो सहायता के लिए हाथ बढ़ाया, इसके लिए मैं फिर एक बार हृदय से आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
Prime Minister Modi emphasized on supply chain resilience, an area of interest for both countries given the global economy's dependence on China.
सप्लाई चेन की मजबूती, नवीनतम टेक्नोलॉजी और अंतरिक्ष जैसे क्षेत्रों में आपकी विशेष रुचि है। यह क्षेत्र मेरे लिए भी विशेष प्रायोरिटी के हैं। इन क्षेत्रों में हमारे बीच सहयोग बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है।
The PM hailed Kamala Harris's historic election victory, describing her elevation to one of the most powerful positions in the world as an inspiration to many.
आपका उपराष्ट्रपति के नाते चुने जाना अपने आप में एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण घटना है, ऐतिहासिक घटना है, और आप पूरे विश्व के में बहुत से लोगों के लिए प्रेरणा स्रोत है।
Prime Minister Modi closed his statement by inviting Kamala Harris to India.
भारत के लोग भी चाहेंगे कि भारत में आपकी इस ऐतिहासिक विजय यात्रा को सम्मानित करें, आपका स्वागत करें, इसलिए मैं आपको विशेष रूप से भारत आने का निमंत्रण देता हूं।
That wasn't all. After the official engagements, Kamala Harris was seen giving a tour of iconic Eisenhower Tower situated west of the White House. With Geeta Mohan in Washington, D.C., Bureau Report, India Today.
And India Today is on the ground in Washington, D.C. Our Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan is now joining me live. Geeta, what were the key highlights of this Modi-Kamala Harris meeting in the background of so much that has happened, not only, of course, politically in other nations, but importantly, the manner in which now since Kamala Harris took over?
Well, it was an interesting meeting, a lot of anticipation in terms of what to expect from the meeting, but it turns out that Vice-President Kamala Harris and Prime Minister Narendra Modi focused on bilateral, regional and global issues more than anything else. Yes, there was a clear statement that democratic values need to be respected and honored, and that was a message not just for countries that have been disrespectful but also aimed at Afghanistan. More importantly over here, the conversation on COVID was very interesting because the kind of cooperation and help that was extended by India to the US, and now also looking at appreciation with regards to India starting exporting of vaccines again, is something that went down very well both in Washington DC as also in New Delhi. But more importantly, it's the regional security and global security scenario that was of prime importance, and China certainly a part of the conversations when it comes to securing the Indo-Pacific. These are key areas when it comes to India and the United States of America, and the tone and tenor certainly set for the meeting, the big meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Biden, as also the Quad Summit that is going to focus and discuss the Indo-Pacific region containing China, but more importantly, it's not just containing China and Chinese aggression, also looking at resilient supply chain to ensure that India is a key part of a global supply chain where countries are not fully only dependent on China.
All right, thank you so much, Geeta. Remember, Geeta will be tracking all the latest, and on India Today, you can catch all the developments. Over now to my colleague Akshita Nandagopal to help us really understand the big takeaways from first Prime Minister Modi and Kamala Harris's historic meeting. Take a look.
Let's sum up all the big takeaways of the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US Vice President Kamala Harris. It was the first time that they met, and the biggest talking point, the biggest takeaway has been on the issue of terror. Pakistan's role in terrorism was highlighted not just by India but also by the United States, with Vice President Kamala Harris also naming Pakistan. There was also a focus on Afghanistan and what's happened to the Afghanistan with the Taliban takeover. That too was discussed. There was also free and open trade in the Indo-Pacific region being discussed, particularly keeping in mind China's aggression. Increasing renewable energy was another talking point between Vice President Kamala Harris and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Then you also had environmental sustainability. This also includes issues of climate change and how both countries can cooperate on that front. Cooperation in space technology, in new tech, that too was discussed. India and US have for long had great ties with regards to space tech as well. Efforts to contain the COVID pandemic, very important. Vaccine distribution, steps to ensure the technology on that front is exchanged was also brought up. Expedited vaccination drives was also discussed between Prime Minister Modi and Vice President Kamala Harris. Ensuring a supply of critical medicines. There's been a lot of talk between India and US amid a pandemic on this topic. This was brought up again between Prime Minister Modi and Vice President Harris.
So the biggest highlight was in one of the most direct warnings to Pakistan from the US government. US Vice President Kamala Harris read out the riot act to Islamabad over its complicit role in aiding terror. Kamala Harris's suo motu. She decided to refer to Pakistan's role in terrorism. She said that terror groups are working in the country and asked Islamabad to take action so it does not have an impact on the US and India's security. according to Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla. When the issue of terrorism came up during the talks with Prime Minister Modi, Kamala Harris's suo motu reference to Pakistan's undeniable imprint on encouraging and aiding terror elements. She also agreed with Modi's briefing on cross-border terrorism and the fact that India has been a victim of terrorism and now for several decades. Kamala Harris reiterated the need to monitor Pakistan's role in supporting terrorism as well.
When the issue of terrorism came up, the Vice President suo motu referred to Pakistan's role in that regard. She said that there were terror groups that were working there. She asked Pakistan to take action so that these groups do not impact on US security and that of India. She agreed with the Prime Minister's briefing on the fact of cross-border terrorism and the fact that India had been a victim of terrorism for several decades now, and all the need to rein in and closely monitor Pakistan's support for such terrorist groups.
But remember, a day after meeting US Vice President Kamala Harris, the countdown will be with regard to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with US President Joe Biden. It is likely to take place today. Biden is set to host Modi at the White House at 8:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. This will be Modi and President Biden's first in-person meeting since Biden took over as the president, and that after the Trump government.
It's a meeting that will have repercussions across the globe spectrum. The leaders of world's oldest democracy and world's largest democracy face to face as the world closely watches. US President Joe Biden will be hosting Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House on Friday. This will be the first time Joe Biden is meeting Prime Minister Modi in person after being elected as the President of the US. The last time Joe Biden met Prime Minister Modi in person was back in 2014, when Biden was the Vice President under Barack Obama's presidency. The two leaders last spoke on the phone in April during the peak of the COVID crisis, when Prime Minister Modi thanked the US for its support and solidarity in time of need. In the last 6 months, a lot has changed. The global economy is shaky. Taliban is back in Afghanistan, and China is aggressively widening its influence. The two leaders will have their task cut out, from vaccines to climate change to defense. Tonight's meeting will have a lot riding on it. Bureau Report, India Today.
Geeta now again joins us from Washington, D.C. Geeta, this is going to be a highlight. Modi-Biden visit after we saw the bonhomie between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and former President Trump as well. So what is likely to be on agenda? What can we expect today at 8:30 p.m.?
Well, this is going to be the first meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Biden after he assumed office. Not the first time that the two leaders are meeting, but certainly the first time with President Biden in office. A crucial one also at that, because we know that during campaigning there was a lot of endorsement that came Trump's way from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but Indo-US ties is a continuum. They are a continuum and they don't really change. Policies with regards to these two countries have been consistent on many accounts, but there are challenges. The challenges are on the issue of visas. The challenges are on the issue of trade. A free trade agreement still is elusive. We still have not seen whether if the two countries are really going to come together to find a middle path to trade better between the two sides. That certainly is an area of concern. Economic cooperation, when you talk about that, you're talking about a post-COVID world where both countries need to cooperate to ensure resilience not just in the market system but also in the global economy, and India and the United States of America can play a very, very crucial role. Apart from that, it's the regional security and global security situation that is of great importance, and it will come up. US withdrawal from the United States of America is a concern for India, because for India the biggest ally in Afghanistan was America, and with them gone, the security scenario for India changes dramatically. Also, recognition of the Taliban government. It is not inclusive. The non-inclusivity is an aspect that is going to be discussed between the two sides, and how to go about engaging a government that has not a single woman in their cabinet, has discriminated against the minorities within their own country. So these are aspects that are certainly going to come up for India. Terrorism is a concern. Pakistan might come up, but China certainly is going to be a part of the conversation.
So definitely there are going to be some interesting highlights of the day. Geeta, we'll be tracking all the latest coming in from you. Take care. Geeta Mohan will be getting us that ground report from Washington, D.C. But with a very crucial meeting coming up, Prime Minister Modi has usually, what we have seen, added a personal touch during all of these interactions previously with the leaders of the world's oldest democracy. So here's a report. What should you expect with Prime Minister Modi today when he meets President Biden? Take a look.
If there's one place Prime Minister Narendra Modi feels at home outside India, it would be the United States. In the 7 years he's been the Prime Minister, this is his 7th visit to the country. And over this period, he has interacted with 3 presidents, Joe Biden, the latest. Indo-US relations under Modi are also about the personal touch he brings to the negotiating table. President Barack Obama, for instance, is friend Barack. A friend to whom he personally served tea. In Donald Trump, Prime Minister Modi found another friend and ally. India carried out surgical strikes in POK after the Uri terror attack and later launched airstrikes on Jaish-e-Mohammed terror camps deep inside Pakistan in Balakot. The US under Trump stood with New Delhi. There were missteps as well, the biggest letdown being edged out of the peace talks in Afghanistan. The camaraderie, however, was too good to believe. It led Prime Minister Modi to Houston, where he, many felt, openly endorsed Trump for a second term.
The words of candidate Trump, "Ab ki baar, Trump Sarkar."
They even took out a victory lap in front of a thrilled diaspora. On many issues, the Biden administration may take a different line from Trump's. If Trump was silent when India abrogated Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, Biden and his Democrat colleagues during the presidential campaign had criticized the decision, much to our discomfort. But much has happened since then. The global economy is shaky after the worst humanitarian crisis since the World War. The Taliban is back in Afghanistan, posing an even bigger terror threat to the world. Pakistan continues its old game of blackmail diplomacy. The Chinese are spreading their influence aggressively. The world is no more unipolar. There are fears of another Cold War.
We're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocks. The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution to shared challenges, even if we have intense disagreements in other areas.
Day 2 is going to be about the big Quad in-person summit meeting between and among the Quad leaders, and the bilateral between President Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where the focus is going to be Afghanistan, counter China, resilient supply chains, as also post-COVID recovery and economic cooperation. With video journalist Yokendra Singh in Washington DC, Geeta Mohan for India Today.
Welcome back. Ahead of the crucial Quad summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral meetings with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. On the agenda were regional global developments in areas related to trade, defense, clean energy and the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's more on what really happened in that bilateral meeting.
The exclusive club of 4 of the world's top leaders. For the first time, all the Quad leaders sitting across the table. President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, the Australian and Japanese premiers meet on Friday to brainstorm on global and regional issues. The focus is the Indo-Pacific, but the summit being held in an eventful year will discuss the pandemic response, particularly strengthening the vaccine supply chain, along with climate change and education. Ahead of the crucial Quad summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison. In the meeting, Prime Minister Modi discussed a wide range of topics, including deepening economic ties between the two countries. Prime Minister Modi also held bilateral talks with his Japanese counterpart Yoshihide Suga. Both are members of the Quadrilateral Security Alliance, or the Quad. And 3 hours before the 4 leaders meet, the Prime Minister will hold his first bilateral meeting with President Biden. The summit in Washington will be closely monitored 11,000 kilometers away in Beijing. The Quadrilateral grouping aims at countering the growing Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific region. Quad's target is a free and open Indo-Pacific, unconstrained by coercion. It's an informal strategic dialogue between 4 like-minded nations to negate China's expansionism. The first in-person summit of the Quad comes at an important time, with the Indo-Pacific undergoing a geopolitical churn. And with Biden taking the lead in hosting it, the United States is signaling its resolve to defend its interest in the Indo-Pacific. With Geeta Mohan in Washington, D.C., Bureau Report, India Today.
But here is what China is up to. China has hit out at the USA, calling for ending the economic sanctions on Afghanistan. China urged the United States of America not to use the frozen foreign exchange reserves of the war-torn country as a bargaining chip to exert political pressure on the hardline terror group. Addressing the G20 foreign ministers via a video link, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi demanded the rushing of humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan without any delay. He highlighted China's decision to provide 200 million yuan, that is around $31 million US aid, which includes 3 million vaccines. Wang Yi has asked the US to release the frozen foreign reserves of Afghanistan's central bank. Remember, the US has frozen about $9.5 billion in assets belonging to Afghanistan's central bank and stopped any shipment of cash to Kabul in a bid to keep the Taliban government from accessing this money. Meanwhile, with what's been happening with all these meetings that are taking place, Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly means business. He's on a mega mission to the US already, but importantly to revive the economy. Modi has met top 5 US CEOs yesterday and talked on trade, investment here in India. Here's more what's been happening with the revival of the economy via Prime Minister's visit to the US. Take a look.
Narendra Modi on a mega mission to revive economy. Connects with top American business honchos. The Prime Minister got down to business soon after landing in the United States and met the top 5 US CEOs back to back. First on Prime Minister's schedule was a meeting with Qualcomm CEO Cristiano R. Amon. Qualcomm creates semiconductor software and provides services related to wireless technology. The company's CEO discussed investment opportunities in telecommunications and electronics sector in India with the Prime Minister.
We talk about the 5G and acceleration of 5G. We talked about incredible opportunity to advance the industry not only domestically in India, but India as an export of technology as we think about the digital transformation enabled by 5G.
Next on schedule, a meeting with Adobe's Shantanu Narayan. Software giant Adobe is planning to support startups and innovations in India.
We talked about was, continued investment in innovation, because he certainly believes that technology is the way to help move things forward. We just talked about how, companies like Adobe can do more in India.
Prime Minister also met First Solar CEO Mark Widmer, a solar major eyeing manufacturing opportunities in India.
First, it was an honor to have a chance to speak with him. Clearly, with his leadership and what he's done to create a really strong balance between industrial policy as well as trade policy, makes it an ideal opportunity for companies like First Solar to establish manufacturing in India.
Then followed one-on-one talks with General Atomics CEO Vivek Lal. General Atomics is a top military drone maker and could potentially partner with India.
Many of my colleagues at US companies see India as a very promising destination from a two-way standpoint, not only technologies and investments in, but coming back to the US.
Finally, Prime Minister Modi met Stephen A. Schwarzman, the CEO of Blackstone. The leading investment firm is planning to expand operations in India. In the pipeline is investment worth $40 billion.
I had already invested $60 billion in assets in India. And over the next 5 years, we're planning another $40 billion of assets. We're one of the 10 largest companies in India.
The Prime Minister later tweeted his marathon sessions with the CEOs were fruitful and the business honchos were appreciative of India's reform trajectory, and that the closer economic linkages between India and USA will benefit the citizens of both nations. Business meetings done and dusted, the stage is now set for the big strategy summits. With Geeta Mohan in Washington, Bureau Report, India Today.